Hey, it's James, and I am here with an Oracle Outlook video reading. I know it's been a minute, and as I've been gone, I've talked about stepping away because I've just had life stuff happen. I'm very busy outside of my video shooting schedule, such as it is these days. And so I've been getting a lot of requests. Over time, people have been sending me requests, and over the last few weeks in particular, I've been getting lots of requests to do video readings. People have been lovingly making suggestions and offering some ideas or thoughts about, what would a video reading consist of, or questions for a reading. So I want to thank each and every one of you for still following the channel, still staying in touch, and for offering those ideas and suggestions. So thank you so much. So, having said that, this is also a viewer requested video, and so the viewer whose suggestion I am taking up for this video reading is Natural Heaven. Now, you may remember the name. One of the previous Oracle Outlook readings I did for this year was also a request from Natural Heaven, so she circled back and made another request. Actually, she made a few of them, but I really liked this one. So the question for this video that we are going to be exploring in the cards is, what do we need to know about Summer Solstice? So I like the idea because we're approaching that. This is the time of the year for that, and the part of me that is the spiritual, witchy, magical practitioner loves this idea about talking about it in the lens of Summer Solstice rather than just like, what do we need to know for the season of summer, right? So when she proposed it to me in that way, I was fully on board. So that is the question we are going to be exploring. Like, what do we need to know about the upcoming summer solstice? Now, I'm going to add to that. So I'm going to be looking at it from the lens of, like, what do we need to know as we are moving into that season, that phase, right? Also, to what might we need to know about the experience overall as we move through the experience of the summer solstice. So I'll be talking about it in those two specific ways. Okay, so now the deck that I'm going to use for this reading. So now the deck is one of my own personal making. While I've been gone from making videos, I have not stopped making decks. So this is one of my newer decks, and I call it the Eclectic Tarot Oracle. So the deck is 77 cards, and it consists of 22 cards representing the major arcana from tarot, and then the other 54 cards are, more oracle cards in nature. So I call it the major arcana, and then I call the oracle cards the oracular arcana. And so I said 22 and 54, but there are 77 cards. It actually has two versions of the magician card. So that is why the numbering is the way it is. So again, we are going to be working with the Eclectic Tarot Oracle. I've made that. It's been actually birthed into the world. I think I completed it towards the end of April, maybe at the start of May. So it's a recent deck creation, and I have another one in the pipeline that I'll be talking about in the future. So if you want to, after watching this video, you want to know more about the deck, or you're open to having me do a video walkthrough, just let me know in the comment section below. So again, I'm working with my Eclectic Tarot Oracle, and so now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and explore Natural Heaven's question about the summer solstice. And here we are with the cards on the table, so I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle, I'm focusing on the intention for this particular reading, and that is, we are just asking the question, and I shouldn't say just, we are asking the question, that's better. We are asking the question about, what do we need to know as we approach the summer solstice? What information, what advice, what guidance would be most helpful and beneficial as we not only enter into the solstice, but maybe what we might experience as we move through it. So because this deck is oracle card size, I tend to shuffle my oracle cards this way as opposed to the rifle shuffle or riffle shuffle, depending on how you want to say that, when I work with more tarot card decks. But because this is a playing card stock, I still can do it. Aha! There we go. So I'm feeling one more time. Would be good. There we go. And so now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And I'm working with a line of 5, my layout of choice. And so I'm looking at the fan for 5 cards that are getting my attention. So that's going to be card 1. 2. 3. 4. And our 5th and final card is over here. So that's 5 cards. I'm going to take the remainder of the deck. I'm going to move that to one side. Alright, so now I'm going to rearrange the cards so they are in a line in the order that they were selected. Alright, so I'm just taking a look to make sure they're somewhat straight. Alright, so now remember our question was, we were asking for information, insight, guidance about the upcoming summer solstice, what we might need to know entering into it, what we might need to know as we move through it. Okay, so when I work with a line of 5 doing, or using oracle cards I should say, the first card for me always represents what's known as the origin. So it talks about 2 things. Number 1, the situation in and of itself, some aspect of it, or, ooh, and I think I jostled the camera, I am so sorry, let me straighten that out, okay. Or what we might need to know about why we're asking the question, like why is the question being even proposed to the cards. Okay, so with that in mind, the card is family. Okay, so I'm going to speak to the person who offered this suggestion for a reading. So for this particular person, she might want to think about how family is, at this point in her life, influencing things, or there's going to be situations or experiences that center on family. So there's that. So it could talk about family in the physical sense, like you're spending time with your family, or it could just be like situations arise that are family-centric, family-oriented, family-centered, or that we are going to be working through issues where we are taking a look at how family has influenced us in terms of, you know, ideas, beliefs, things of that nature. Because a lot of our belief systems that we carry out into the world come from our families, our immediate families. A lot of them originate from that. So if you are spiritually minded, then you might want to take a look at that potential aspect of the card and seeing what influences from your family are at work in your life, whether you're conscious of them, or it could be like unconscious awareness of family influences are going to be coming up for you to examine and to work through and possibly heal. If you realize that it's not working in your best and highest good, maybe it did in the past and it's no longer, that kind of thing. As I look at the image, for me, I tend to look at this idea about the baby being a big part of the image here, because the adult hands are cradling the feet of the baby or the infant. So this could just represent the birth of something if it's not in the literal sense, like there is a new addition to the family. If it's not that, then it could be this idea about, you know, birthing something, something being initiated or brought into your life. It could also be, a new responsibility. If you go with the ideas that parents taking care of children represent a new responsibility that they are undertaking, right? It could also symbolically represent, taking on a new duty or a new responsibility, something of that nature. It could also be a situation that is in its stage of infancy, going with the idea that this is an infant on the card, right? And how are we going to handle that? What actions do we need to take surrounding that? And that would be the hands. The hands represent action and activity, right? So there is that to consider as well. And then the other thing that I want to talk about here with this card in terms of the imagery is the feet. So the feet could represent our understanding of the situation. So if we go with the birth of something or something in its infancy stage, then this could be about some level of understanding, some understanding that we are coming to grips with, hands around the feet, that we are grasping some kind of understanding of a situation. Now that could be, again, around family, since the card is the family card. So it could just be like we are having to handle or come to grips with or grasp some understanding surrounding our experience with family. Right? Now, in a more spiritual sense, the feet, we were being shown the soles of the feet. So this could just be a pun, for soul. S-O-L-E is a pun for soul, S-O-U-L. Right? So for some people, they may be doing some examination or some work, some soul work. And it could be, again, around family, around your role in the family. If you go with the idea that we incarnate into our families by choice and design, that's a very spiritual and metaphysical idea or thought. But if you understand that to be true for you, then again, it could be like you come to some greater awareness of like the soul agreement or the soul contract that everybody in the family has played in terms of your experience within the family, right? So that's what I want to offer to Natural Heaven. That might be of personal relevance or significance to her because, again, she's the one who made the suggestion for this reading, but that may also resonate with other people as well. So that is the family card in the position of origin, right? So now we're moving to the next card. For me, the next card, once we look at the origin card, the next card would be about what possible expectations might we have around this idea about moving into the summer solstice, right? So let's take a look at that. And this is the World at Large card. So this is a card from the major arcana of the deck. So as I said in the opener, this deck, consists of two arcana. The major arcana, which is associated or connected to the tarot deck, and then the oracular arcana, which the family card comes from, which is the other arcana in the deck, right? So right now, for me, as a person who has read tarot for a number of years, for me, when I pull a major arcana card, it carries more weight in the reading. So the first thing I want to say about the expectation is that the World at Large card represents this idea about a whole new world opening up. So maybe given the context of what the collective is going through, right? This could be like something of a global nature, something of a universal nature, something that's much larger than the individual, than the self, right? So this could be about the world opening back up, and I'm talking about that in terms of COVID-19 and the pandemic and how that has affected the world, and the world starting to shift. Again, where maybe we have been more isolated or contained within our family units, our immediate family, right? And then the world at large could suggest, again, it's a travel card, so it could suggest travel opening up and then maybe giving us the opportunity to see extended family members or even maybe immediate family members that we haven't seen in over a year, right? And then this could make sense, like maybe some people out in the collective have had new members or new additions to the family that they haven't seen. And so now with this as the expectation, saying like, I am now ready to get back out into the world, to see more of the world, and that may also involve family, right? Now, that's the maybe material, physical, mundane aspect of the card. The world also talks about things coming full circle, or the successful, completion of a cycle. So if we go with the idea here that this card may be for some people talking about family influences at work, then the world card would be about coming to some new level of awareness about that, like seeing the bigger picture, right? And then maybe ending a certain chapter or phase, or completing a certain chapter or phase in your life story. And again, it may be around family, that kind of thing. Another aspect of the world for me can represent people who are spiritual practitioners. So if you vibed with the whole idea about soul contracts and soul agreements within family, then this card may suggest like there is some spiritual work around that. You may actually consider the idea about, a spiritual practice or becoming a spiritual practitioner who works either with this idea of family or family influences and how we can move beyond them when we are ready, that kind of thing. This card for me, in terms of spiritual practices or being a spiritual practitioner, can also represent things like astrology, numerology, palmistry, psychology, even being a card reader like yours truly, those kinds of things. It could also be too, like maybe there's something, I'm seeing this, maybe there's something of a generational or something that's being passed down in terms of spiritual work or spiritual practice in a way that's like opening up a whole new world for you. But the world at large card in and of itself talks about the successful completion of a chapter or phase or an experience in one's life. It's about triumph, victory, success, and it's also about a new level of awareness. But I'm seeing this as there is a global expectation, there is a universal expectation, that kind of thing. And so for me, my immediate thought is about like this return to the world, like going out and seeing the world, being out in the world, right? So that's what I see with the world at large. So now let's take a look at the center card. The center card would be, this is known as a hidden influence. I have kind of relanguaged that because I was taught this spread by an oracle card teacher. And so I tend to read it also as the heart of the matter or the central focus, and that just comes from my experience reading Lenormand and Kipper and Gypsy cards, things like that. So I have adopted that, like would be the heart of the matter. So let's take a look at that. And here we have the Stroke of Midnight card. Okay, so when this card comes up for me, if you notice the imagery, here we have a silhouette of Cinderella, and next to her is a clock that is about to strike midnight. So the image is the scene in Cinderella where she's at the ball and she realizes that it's almost midnight. And so she's aware of the fact that the magic spell that her fairy godmother has created for her is about to subside, recede, go away, disappear. And she's about to turn back into the Cinderella that we all know before she goes to the ball, right? So this could be talking about timing with the clock, right? And so we have to be aware about the cycles of time, right? And it could just be a matter of when I pull this card, or when my intention for creating this card is about like being aware that we are in a magical moment, but also understand that it is a moment and that its time will pass, right? And there may be some aspect about returning to our former life. So for me, what I'm seeing with these three cards is this idea of taking a look at our own history. So there may be something about moving into the summer solstice that we become more aware either about time or timing or about wanting to spend time, and not losing sight of those magical moments. Again, that could be with family or maybe something other than that. But I think we're being encouraged to take a look at how precious time can be, and are we making the most of the time that we have? That's the message that's coming through right now. So are we making the most of the time that we have allotted to us to create magic in our lives, right? So there is that. the clock symbolizes not just time, but it can also represent the heart and the circulatory system. It's a pun for the ticker, right? So this could just be something that's more heart-centered, more emotional-based, those kinds of things, like we are working through or processing some kind of feelings or emotions, that kind of thing. What I love about the fact that she has her tiara on in the silhouette, so for me the silhouette is, the tiara, excuse me, is placed on the silhouette of the crown, the head. So that could just represent being open and receptive to insights. Remember, the world at large, which actually she is facing or looking at, the world at large was talking about a new level of awareness. So this could be like, ahas, epiphanies, light bulb moments, things that just kind of drop into our crown chakra. And I'm looking at the imagery. If you notice that there is a binary code around the world, so that makes me think of things being digital, right? But where I was going with that is that it could also represent like downloads. If you go with the idea that maybe this is talking about global technology, imagery-wise, then it could be like receiving a download, just like we download information from a computer, right? Or from a source on the internet. That would be a pun for the World Wide Web. As we download information just like that, we also receive downloads from the universe, right? The world at large is also a card that represents the universe in a spiritual context, right? So it's about being aware that we may get some downloads or receive downloads, information, maybe about a particular time in our lives, or what we could do to make the most of the time we have in the moment, or what we need to do regarding a time moving forward, right? Going with the idea of these forward narration, right? But the stroke of midnight, again, talks about this idea about being in a space of magic, but also understanding that time is fleeting, right? And so how can you make the most of the time you have in the moment, right? The other aspect that I didn't talk about is that this card was also based on a tarot card that talks about the idea about making a getaway, right? So going back to the scene in Cinderella, right? She wants to kind of make her getaway before the clock strikes midnight, and she reverts back to her former self, right? So it's about like, what do we need to kind of maybe make a getaway from? What do we need to kind of leave behind? And can we do it discreetly, right? In her case, it's about making a clean getaway, getting by undetected, under the radar, that kind of thing. Hoping that nobody will notice, all those kinds of things, right? So there's that. So it could just be a matter of like getting away from maybe a point or a time in your past, in your history. And here's the thing, maybe with the family card that's coming to me in the moment, maybe in some cases with family, and they could be well-intentioned, but sometimes we have people who are closest to us. So maybe if it's not immediate family, maybe it's just people, who are extremely close to us, where we are trying to move beyond our past, a time in our history, and other people are not as willing to get on board with that idea, right? And what I'm saying by that is that they continually bring the past up to us as if we have not moved beyond it, right? So all that to say is that it could be like you may need to kind of examine or re-examine some point in your history and asking yourself, have you fully moved beyond it? And it could be showing up for you to say, if that's not the case, would you be willing to move beyond it now? So that's what I'm seeing with the stroke of midnight at the heart. So now let's take a look at the next card. And so the next card here would be guidance or advice. And so as a card reader, when I read guidance or advice, I'm always mindful of the idea that the cards are offering a point of view. They don't encourage me to, or say that I need to do this, I should do this, I ought to do this. It's always like for my consideration. So this is for your consideration. So let's take a look at the card. And here we have, I had a feeling this card was going to show up. So this is the Cycles card. So here we have, on each side of the Stroke of Midnight card, we have two major arcana cards, right? So this would be, if you were tarot fluent, this would be the World. And then the Cycles card would be the Wheel of Fortune. Now, if you notice, I look for patterns because the Cycles card talks about cycles and patterns, right? So we have this idea about cycles and patterns coming back up, this idea about this is a Ferris wheel in terms of the imagery. So a Ferris wheel goes around and around and around. So this could be repetition, right? So again, I love how this follows up what I just said. So this could be about taking a look at a point in our history, a time in our past, and ask ourselves, have we really moved beyond it? And if not, then the Cycles card is saying this is an opportunity to do so. Because for me, this is about an opportunity being presented to, either break a particular cycle or interrupt a particular pattern, or break a pattern or interrupt a cycle, one or the other. But this is an opportunity for that to happen, right? So just as I talked about, this is the world. If you're tarot fluent, this is the Wheel of Fortune. So again, the Wheel of Fortune talks about opportunities. It talks about growth. It talks about development. It talks about evolution, right? So there's something about evolving, right? For some people, it could be you're taking a look at your role or your place or your position in your family and seeing maybe how you have grown or evolved either within that context or grown beyond it, right? Or that you were just noting your own growth and development, right? Whatever the case may be, stroke of midnight as the center here saying this is the time. The time is to grow and evolve and to move on. Then the thing about the stroke of midnight card, the clock about to strike midnight, midnight represents a transition. It represents a day that is coming to its end and the beginning of a new day, right? So for some of us, it may be like, what day do we need to let come to an end so that we can start our new day? Right? This could be like the birth of a new day. I'm talking about metaphorically speaking, right? But even that, it would be a transition from night, the end, and to morning, right? We go from PM the night before to AM the next day, right? So there's something about a transition. This is a time of transition, right? It's about moving beyond certain things. But it's for your best and highest good. It's for your growth, your development, your evolution, your expansion, right? If you are watching this and you consider yourself, to be a spiritual being having a human experience, this may be an opportunity for you to grow beyond certain patterns and cycles. But with the awareness of what did those cycles and patterns have to offer you in terms of lessons, right? So again, and the interesting thing about the world at large and the Cycles card, both are travel cards. So that brings in that element again about wanting to be out into the world, wanting to, see the world, maybe even travel more regularly, those kinds of things. Because both of those share travel, as an aspect or a meaning of the card. And so with that, the Cycles could be talking about going with the idea that we're still experiencing the pandemic to some degree. This could be about what are the risks involved in travel? Is it a gamble? Those kinds of things, because I tend to look at this as a gamble card or, taking a chance card or taking chances card, those kinds of things, right? So that is Cycles. I had a feeling there was something else I wanted to say. So I'm just going to pause for a moment to see if what that information is going to kick in or come in. No, I guess I'm feeling complete. Okay, so that is the Cycles card. I may circle back if the thought drops in about yes, I did. I had to give it a moment. Okay, so I'm looking at the image. Back to the image. So again, the image is of a Ferris wheel. And so that could symbolically represent, again, we have this round circular symbol. So there's something about an emotional need or something of an emotional nature that's being highlighted here. But the symbolism talks about fun and amusement, right? So it could just be and summer's great for that. We do lots of things in the summer, collectively speaking, that center around, fun things, fun activities, going to places or venues of amusement. So this could be going to the amusement parks, going to, movie theaters, things like that. Things that we do for fun. So it could just be a reintroduction of fun and amusement back into our lives. And so that could be like, it could be like you go to a place that provides those things or venues that provide those things, but it could also be like you just sitting with yourself and considering what would bring more fun and amusement into my life, and would I be willing to embark on those things? That was the other thought that came in. Okay, so now I'm feeling I'm complete with that. I can move on. And then the last card, of course, is the outcome, right? And the card is the Mask card. Okay. So for me, this card is talking about, and I find it very interesting that it mirrors the Family card on the opposite end. So the Mask card talks about our image and our identity, right? The roles that we play and the roles that we choose to adopt, right? Because I tend to look at this card as representing, it's very funny that we talked about fun and amusement, or another word would be entertainment, and then we have the mask. So the mask for me can represent, actors and actresses from an entertainment standpoint, right? So going with that, it would, again would be about, the roles and the image and how we self-identify, or the group of people that we identify with, because there's a number of masks around the center mask, right? So again, it could be talking about who are we when we are in our family constructs. What's the role? What's the identity that we have? What's the image that we take on in our family, but also too in the larger world, right? Because we come out from our families into the world, right? So this last card is saying we may have a greater awareness this particular summer solstice as we move through it about our sense of self, how we identify, how we self-identify either within our family or within certain communities or groups that we are a part of. Taking a look at that. And then of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this in light of the fact that I've talked about COVID-19 and the pandemic and things like that. So there may be some issues with people regarding the wearing of face masks. That is still probably going to be a thing, right? And so I'm not going to offer any more than that. So, because that could take me down a rabbit hole with a whole lot of ideas and beliefs that are being put out there into the world regarding face masks, possibility of vaccines and vaccinations. I'm not going to go there. I'm just looking at the image, and it makes me think of face masks. So in terms of the metaphorical sense about our image of self, our self-image, how we identify, those kinds of things, we may come into greater awareness around that, because again, we have this circular symbolism, right? All these masks are in a circular pattern around the center mask. So we've had lots of imagery here that dealt with circular things. So there could be, again, things coming full circle, or we becoming more aware, those kinds of things, expansion, those kinds of things. But it made me feel like there may be something having to do with also the issues regarding face masks and face masks in public, right? So on that note, I will go ahead and end this reading here. So for Natural Heaven, who asked me to do this, I hope you found this reading helpful and informative. And if you are not Natural Heaven and you came upon this, I also hope that you found it of interest. It felt really good for me as a person who has stepped away from doing readings and video readings on my channel for some time, because I'm going through a great deal of life experience right now, and so I am time challenged. And the only reason why I was even able to get to this video today was I had a shift and changes in my schedule, and so time was created for me to shoot this video. So again, as I wrap up, I hope you found it informative. I hope you found it helpful. This is James Mitchell, thanking you for sharing the space here with me for this video reading, and I'm hoping that we can get together in the same space at some point in the future for another video reading together. So until then, take care and have a wonderful day.